The East of England is one of 9 official regions of England at the first level of NUTS for statistical purposes. It was created in 1994 and was adopted for statistics from 1999. It includes the ceremonial counties of Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Essex, Hertfordshire, Norfolk and Suffolk. Essex has the highest population in the region. Its population at the 2011 census was 5,847,000. The area is mostly low-lying, and the highest place is at Clipper Down at 817 feet in the far southwestern corner of the region near to Irvinghoe Beacon in the Irvinghoe Hills. Bedford, Luton, Basildon, Peterborough, Southend-on-Sea, Norwich, Ipswich, Colchester, Chelmsford and Cambridge are the region's most populous urban areas. The southern part of the region lies in the London commuter belt. Geography. The region has the lowest elevation range in the UK. North Cambridgeshire and the Essex coast have most of the around 5% of the region which is below 10 metres above sea level. The fens are partly in North Cambridgeshire, which is notable for the lowest point in the country in the land of the village of Home, 2.75 metres below mean sea level, which was once Whittlesea, Basildon and Harlow, with Stevenage and Hemel Hempstead were main new towns in the 1950s and 1960s, with much industry found there. 3 on these are on main motorways, and fairly equidistant from London. In late 1960s, the Roskell Commission looked at Thurley in Bedfordshire, Nuthampstead in Hertfordshire and Foulness in Essex as a possible third airport for London. Historical use. The East of England succeeded the little-used standard statistical region East Anglia. The East of England Civil Defence region was identical to today's region. East Anglia an overlap with home counties. England between the Wash and Thames estuary has since time immemorial been and continues to be known as East Anglia, including the county traversing the west of this line, Cambridgeshire. Essex, despite meaning East Saxons, previously formed part of the South East England, as did Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, a mixture of definite and debatable home counties. The earliest use of the term is from 1695. Charles Davenant, in an essay upon ways and means of supplying the war, wrote, "The 11 home counties, which are thought in land taxes to pay more than the proportion," then cited a list including these 4. The term does not appear to have been used in taxation since the 18th century. Climate. East Anglia is one of the driest parts of the United Kingdom, with average rainfall ranging from 450 mm to 750 mm. This is usually because low-pressure systems and weather fronts from the Atlantic have lost a lot of the moisture over land by the time they reach eastern England. However, the fens in Cambridgeshire are prone to flooding should a strong system affect the area. Winter is mostly cool, but non-prevailing cold easterly winds can affect the area from the continent. These can bring heavy snowfall if the winds interact with a low-pressure system over the Atlantic of France. Northerly winds can also be cold, but are not usually as cold as easterly winds. Westerly winds bring milder and typically wetter weather. Southerly winds usually bring mild air but chill if coming from further east than Spain. Spring is a transitional season that can be chilly to start with but is usually warm by late April-May. The weather at this time is often changeable and occasionally showery. Summer is usually warm and continental air from mainland Europe. The Azores high usually leads to at least a few weeks of hot, balmy weather with prolonged, warm to hot weather. The number of summer storms from the Atlantic, such as the remnants of a tropical storm, usually coincides with the location of the jet stream. The East tends to receive much less of the rain than the other regions. Autumn is usually mild, with some days being very unsettled and rainy and others warm. At least part of September and early October in the East have warmer warm and settled weather, but only in rare years is there an Indian summer where fine weather marks the entire traditional harvest season. Demographics. Deprivation. The most deprived districts, according to the Indices of Deprivation 2007 in the region are, in descending order, Great Yarmouth, Norwich, Luton, Peterborough and Ipswich. At county level, after Luton and Peterborough, which have a similar level of deprivation, in descending order there is Southend-on-Sea, then Thurrock. The least deprived districts, in descending order, are South Cambridgeshire, Uttlesford, Mid Bedfordshire, East Hertfordshire, St Albans, Brentwood, Rochford, Chelmsford, Huntingdonshire, Mid Suffolk, Broadland, North Hertfordshire, Dacorum, Three Rivers, South Norfolk, East Cambridgeshire and Suffolk Coastal. At county level, the least deprived areas in the region, in descending order, are Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, with all three having a similar level of deprivation, then Essex. The region has the lowest proportion of jobless households in the UK, 0.5%. In March 2011 the region's unemployment claimant count was 3.0%. Inside the region, the highest rate is Great Yarmouth with 6.2%, followed by Peterborough, Ipswich and Southend-on-Sea on 4.7%. Elections. In the 2015 general election, there was an overall swing of 0.25% from the Conservatives to Labour, and the Liberal Democrats lost 16% of its vote. All of Hertfordshire and Suffolk is now Conservative. A region's electorate voted 49% Conservative, 22% Labour, 16% UKIP, 8% Liberal Democrat and 4% Green. Like other regions, the division of seats favours the dominant party in the region, and the Conservatives have 52, Labour 4, UKIP 1 and 1 Liberal Democrat. Eurostat nuts. In the Eurostat nomenclature of territorial units for statistics, the East of England is a Level 1 nuts region, coded UKH, which is subdivided as follows. Governance. Regional government. At East of England Regional Strategy Board exists to coordinate the work of the local councils in the area and provides other functions. It is based in Flempton on the A1101 northwest of Bury St Edmunds. The government shut the Government Office for the East of England in 2011. The East of England Development Agency is being closed also. The East of England also elects MEPs for the East of England. East of England Plan Local Government. The official region consists of the following subdivisions. History. A mammoth skeleton found at West Runton, Norfolk, in 1990 is the most complete in the world. Fossilized footprints discovered on a nearby beach in 2010 at Happisburgh are 900,000 years old, and the oldest evidence of early humans outside of Africa, known as Homo antecessor, with the earliest flint hand axe in northwest Europe. Simon Sudbury, and Archbishop of Canterbury from 1375 to 81, introduced the poll tax in Sudbury in the 1300s, and the subsequent Peasants' Revolt in Essex in May 1381 was led by Tyler. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, from Suffolk, qualified as Britain's first female doctor in 1865, and was the granddaughter of Richard Garrett, whose company produced some of the first steam-powered road vehicles. On the 3rd of October 1959, postcodes were introduced in the UK at Norwich only. Norwich was the first main town in the UK to be pedestrianised in 1967. The Access credit card was introduced in October 1972 from Southend. Kings Lynn was the first in the UK to install a town centre CCTV system from 1987. Civil War and the Protectorate. The East of England was a major force and resource for Parliament, and in particular in the form of the Eastern Association. Oliver Cromwell came from Huntingdon. Second World War, Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex played host to the American 8 Bomber Command and 9th Air Force. The Imperial War Museum has a museum commemorating the participation and sacrifice near to the M11 south of Cambridge. Stansted Airport was RAF Stansted Mount Fitchay, home to the 344th Bombardment Group. The de Havilland Mosquito was mainly assembled at Hatfield and Leavesden. Although much of the innovative wooden structure originated outside the region from the furniture industry of High Wycombe, the Mosquito entered service in 1942 with 105 Squadron at RAF Horsham St Faith. RAF Tempsford in Bedford is the airfield from where SOE secret agents for Europe took off, with 138 Squadron which parachuted agents and equipment and 161 Squadron which landed and retrieved agents. 19 Squadron at Duxford was the first to be equipped with the Spitfire on 4 August 1938. Rudimentary drone technology was developed by the USAF at RAF Fursfield to destroy the fortress of Mimiex at Moix, a prototype drone aircraft of Operation Aphrodite, with John F. Kennedy's older brother Joseph P. Kennedy, Jr. aboard, exploded on 12 August 1944 over the Blythe Estuary in Suffolk. A magnetic mine found in 1939 at Shoeburyness, now in Southend, allowed the German magnetic mine threat to be subdued, with work done at HMS Vernon in Portsmouth. Cold War. The 81st Tactical Fighter Wing were at RAF Bentwaters from January 1952, and also at RAF Woodbridge in the late 1980s. Some of the aircraft went to RAF Alconbury. Alconbury closed in 1992, and Bentwaters closed in 1993, with the American Air Forces being in the area for 42 years. The USAF aircraft subsequently moved to Spangdahlem Air Base in Rhineland-Palatinate, Germany. At RAF Marham in West Norfolk, 214 Squadron with the Vickers Valiant developed the RAF's refueling system. Later the squadron would be equipped with the Handley Page Victor. Work on refueling had also taken place at RAF Tarrant Rushton in Dorset. For the 1950s, RAF Whiton was an important reconnaissance base for the RAF, mainly 543 Squadron. The base is now home of the Defence Intelligence Fusion Centre, previously known as JARIC, or the Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Centre from 1956. Scientific heritage. Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA at Cambridge on 28 February 1953. William Bateson, at Cambridge, invented the term genetics and co-discovered genetic linkage with Reginald Punnett. At the Bourne Hall Clinic in Bourne, west of Cambridge, in vitro fertilization was first achieved in 1978. Smith, Klein and French developed Tagamet in the 1970s at the Frith, north of Welwyn. The site was sold by GSK in December 2010, and in World War II was home to Station IX, which made sabotage equipment for secret agents. Tagamet was for many years the world's best-selling prescription drug for stomach ulcers. The team had been led by C. Robin Ganelin, Graham Durant and John Emmett. In 1912 in Cambridge, Frederick Goland Hopkins discovered vitamins, gaining the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1929. Under Sir David Jack, Allen and Amp, Hanbury's at Ware developed Ventolin in the late 1960s and Zantac in the late 1970s. Zantac was the first pharmaceutical to sell more than $1 billion per year. More recently, Seretid was developed there, and the site is now part of GSK, which has a separate manufacturing site there. In 1975 at Cambridge, C.E. Acute S.A.R. Milstein and George J. F. Kohler separated monoclonal antibodies at the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology, and gained the 1984 Nobel Prize for Medicine. The MRC-LMB has had many Nobel Prizes for medicine. Adalimumab, known as Humira, the world's best-selling drug, was partly developed in Cambridge by Cambridge Antibody Technology. Smith and Amp nephew research was based at Gilston Park House, in Gilston, north of Harlow. At Papworth Hospital, the UK's first heart transplant took place in January 1979, being operated by Sir Terence English and Sir Roy Calner, on 44-year-old Charles McHugh. The world's first heart, lung and liver transplant was performed there on the 17th of December 1986. The world's first long-term artificial heart was implanted on the 26th of August 1994 by Dr. John Walwork. The patient lived for 9 months. John Walwork had performed Europe's first heart-lung transplant there in 1984. Such transplants are often carried out on people with cystic fibrosis. Ben Milstein conducted Britain's first open-heart surgery there in September 1958 on a woman with an atrial septal defect, known as a hole in the heart. John Ray was an important naturalist from Essex, and the first to distinguish flowering plants between monocotyledons and dicotyledons in his 1682 book Methodus Plantarum Nova. Charles Townshend, 2nd Viscount Townshend, of Raynham Hall in Norfolk, introduced crop rotation to Britain in the early 1700s using wheat, turnips, barley and clover. The Maris Piper disease-resistant potato was developed by the Plant Breeding Institute in Trumpington in 1966. At the Rothamsted Experimental Station, near Harpenden in Hertfordshire, 2,4-D was discovered. Under Judah Hirsch-Quastel, this is the most widely used herbicide in the world. Later at the station, the pyrethroid insecticide was developed. Under Michael Elliott, which is now the most common insecticide on the domestic market. William Gilbert from Colchester was an important early physicist. The Gilbert was a former unit of magnetization. Radar was developed in around Chelmsford in the late 1930s and at Bawdsey Manor on the Suffolk coast. On the 24th of July 1935 at Orfordness was the first detection on a court screen of tracking a plane on radar, a Westland Wallace. Earlier radio had been developed around Chelmsford by the Marconi Company. Much of Britain's electronics industry was derived from Marconi, later to be GEC in their BAE systems. In 1864 James Clerk Maxwell at Cambridge discovered his electromagnetic wave equation, part of his Maxwell's equations. CSR has made much technology for Bluetooth. William Hyde Wollaston, a chemist from Norfolk, discovered palladium in 1802 and rhodium in 1804, and in 1802 discovered the features of the Sun's electromagnetic spectrum, known as Fraunhofer lines, allowing the chemical composition of the Sun to be determined. In 1938 at Cambridge, Mary Cartwright developed chaos theory with John Enzer Littlewood. Edward Norton Lorenz, a meteorologist from the USA, would mainly develop chaos theory in 1963, and a butterfly effect in 1969. In the 1960s at Cambridge, the scanning electron microscope was developed by Sir Charles Oatley, and first made by the Cambridge Scientific Instrument Company in 1965. In 1966, Cambridge geophysicists Frederick Vine and Drummond Matthews proved the theory of plate tectonics and continental drift. Plate tectonics was first suggested at Cambridge by Dan Mackenzie. Continental drift had first been proposed, though not extensively proved, by the German Alfred Wegener in 1912. In 1985, Norwich's Joe Farman discovered the hole in the ozone layer, when part of Cambridge's British Antarctic Survey. John Cockcroft and Ernest Walton, using a particle accelerator with a Cockcroft-Walton generator, performed the first artificial nuclear disintegration on the 14th of April 1932, with a proton beam on lithium at the Cavendish laboratory. Using this work on the 12th of September 1933, the Hungarian Leo Szilard would conceive the idea of the nuclear chain reaction while standing at a set of traffic lights on Southampton Row in Bloomsbury, returning from a lecture by Ernest Rutherford which discussed H.G. Wells' 1914 book, The World Set Free, that overtly prophesies nuclear weapons. The Cavendish Laboratory has 29 Nobel Prize winners, more than anywhere else, and many Western countries. Industrial heritage: Ransomes, Sims and Amp. Jeffries of Ipswich built the first engine-powered commercial lawnmower in 1902. The firm would later own Mansfield. The Chorleywood bread process from 1961 changed bread production all over the world. John Dickinson Stationery of Hertfordshire was the first company to produce gummed envelopes in 1850, and windowed envelopes in 1929. The Thursford Collection in Norfolk is the country's biggest collection of steam engines. The Marconi Company's new street works on the B1008 in Chelmsford was the world's first radio factory in 1912. On the 15th of June 1920, Britain's first radio broadcast was made by Dame Nellie Melba. The first radio broadcast in UK was in December 1919 from Marconi in Chelmsford, broadcasting news for the first time in December 1920. The world's first scheduled broadcast from the 2MT Marconi transmitter at Writtle was from the 14th of February 1922, only on Tuesday evenings. The world's first real-time computer with memory store was built in 1947 by the Elliott Brothers Research Laboratories at Bournemouth. The site became Marconi Avionics in 1978 and GEC Avionics in 1984, and also had GEC computers. Glues for the Mosquito wooden airframe were developed by Norman de Brown at his Duxford-based Aero Research Limited, which invented Araldite. The site is now owned by Hexcel. The Mosquito fuselage was made from two halves of balsa wood from Ecuador and Canadian birch, which had a madipolum fabric over the surface. The wings were made from plywood and spruce. De Havilland built the Comet at Hatfield, and built the Blue Streak rocket launcher at its Stevenage base. By the end of World War II, the DH Goblin, designed by Frank Halford, was the world's most powerful jet engine. Ball bearings for the Merlin engine came from Hoffman of Chelmsford. Its former site is now the Rivermead University campus. The first autoland system demonstrated on an airliner was with a B Trident at Ray Bedford in March 1964, with a system developed by Smiths Industries, with similar work also done for the RAF at RAF Martlesham Heath. Plessy was a world leader in instrument landing systems. Rex Pearson from Norfolk was the main designer for Vickers until the 1950s, designing the Vickers Vimy to the Vickers Viscount, both pioneering aircraft. From 1945 to 1992, Rolls-Royce designed and built its helicopter engines at its small engine division at Leavesden, now film set. These engines are now built by Rolls-Royce Turbomeca. Britain's first satellite constructed in the UK, Ariel 3, was built at BAC's Guided Weapon Division in Stevenage in the mid-1960s, later launched in May 1967. The Europa was initially mostly British, led by Hawker Siddeley Dynamics at Stevenage and test-fired at Woomera Test Range in Australia, but later the subsequent Ariane would be mostly French-built and launched at Guiana Space Centre in French Guiana. Arianespace is 64% French and 20% German by ownership, and has no British share of ownership. The Rapier was developed by BAC at Stevenage. The first transition from hover to free flight of the Hawker Siddeley P1127 took place on 8 September 1961 at Ray Bedford, with its first conventional flight also there on 13 March 1961. The Harrier was first delivered to RAF Wittering on 18 April 1969 to 1 Squadron. The next squadron to have the Harrier was 4 Squadron at RAF Wildenrath. In June 1954, the first hunting Percival jet Provis flew from Luton Airport. It was the world's first designed jet trainer aircraft. On 30 April 1958, the Buccaneer first flew from Ray Bedford. The hybrid air vehicles HAV-3, unveiled in 2014 at Cardington, is the longest aircraft in the world. The Comet GALYP was the first to enter commercial service for a jet on 2 May 1952, on a flight from London Airport to Johannesburg, flying back from Rome to London, on a flight from Singapore on 10 January 1954. The aircraft was the second Comet to crash in flight on BOAC Flight 781, and may be the first to show structural failure. 114 Comets were made. The British Aerospace 125 was the world's first business jet, when it first flew in August 1962 at Hatfield. Later mostly built at Chester, later it evolved into the Hawker 800, made in Wichita, Kansas, and the design is the world's best-selling business jet, with over 1,000 built. The Airbus A300, which entered service in 1974, started life as the Hawker Siddeley Breguet Nord HBN 100, with much of the initial design produced by Hawker Siddeley from its HS 134 design. The wings were developed from the Trident supercritical design of the companies involved with Airbus at the beginning. Only Hawker Siddeley at Hatfield had designed anything as large with jet engines. The company may have consequently been headquartered at Hatfield, and not to lose. Today's Airbus wings are all made at Broughton in Flintshire, and all the undercarriages made in Cheltenham. In 1951, on an EDSAC computer at Cambridge, Sandy Douglas made the world's first computer game with a digital graphical display, a version of Noughts and Crosses, the Leo. The world's first commercial computer developed by John Simmons at J. Lyons & Co. was a Cambridge EDSAC. Sinclair Research was based in Cambridge, as was its competitor in the 1980s, Acorn Computers. Sinclair invented the Sinclair Executive in 1972, the world's first slimline pocket calculator. Then it invented the world's first digital quartz watch, the Black Watch, in 1975. Standard Telecommunication Laboratories in Harlow, then owned by ITT, is where fiber optic communications as we know today are recognized as beginning. When developed by George Hockham and Sir Charles K. Cow, the first trial cable was laid between Hitchin and Stevenage in 1978. The first optical fiber that was part of a public switched telephone network was laid between Martlesham and Ipswich in 1978. Acorn successfully tested its first chip on 26 April 1985, leading to the Acorn Archimedes in 1987, powered by its chip design. Acorn Risk Machines Limited was formed in 1990, becoming Arm Holdings in 1998, and its chip designs went into all Nokia phones, and on Texas Instruments chips. Currently there are now over 20 billion ARM chips in mobile phones. Vaughan Programming Services, founded by Dina St. Johnston in 1959 in Hertfordshire, was Britain's first software house. Sizewell-B is Britain's only pressurised water reactor, and is near Leiston in Suffolk with enough power for 2 million homes. Sizewell-A had opened in 1966 and Bradwell had opened in 1962. Sir Christopher Cockerell developed the hovercraft on Oulton Broad, Suffolk in 1956. Shellhaven, now in Thurrock, was where bitumen was first ever produced there in 1920. The refinery closed in 1999. Charles Wallace Chapman of Perkins Engines invented the high-speed diesel engine, first building an experimental version in December 1932 on Queen Street in Peterborough. The world's first diesel-engined car, a Hillman Wizard fitted with the engine in March 1933, was tested around Peterborough. The first production engine would be the Perkins Wolf, with the innovative Perkins Aeroflow combustion system. The Perkins Engines Company developed mainly from this engine. In 1808, Henry Fordrinier developed a process at St. Neots to produce continuous rolls of paper, as made today. The Fordrinier machine, developed with Brian Donkin, John Crossfield in Hemel Hempstead, invented the color scanner in 1958. Great Yarmouth's Malcolm Sayer designed the Jaguar E-Type, and initial plans of the Jaguar XJS. Captain George William Manby of Norfolk invented the first portable fire extinguisher in 1813.